I had to break my pledge of ending streams and not doing these anymore because I've encountered a subject that I think is more significant than a self declaration. Now, to reiterate the history of the Yemen conflict, the one that has led to what many consider to be a genocide, 3 years ago, during 2015, the Houthi rebels overthrew the present government controlling Yemen, where that government turned out to be an ally of Saudi Arabia, who in response received aid from the United States in, I guess, what would you call the word? I want to say participating, but co-oping. They cooperated with the Saudis to bomb Yemen and kill over 10,000 civilians, as well as block the ports of Yemen, so they can't bring in any new food or water or medicine. And they're doing this while having bombings of mosques, grocery stores, churches, schools. Um, and so the United States participates in this to get billions of dollars in weapons deals. They sell illegal cluster bombs, which are banned by international law. So it's a war crime all around. They use the Iraq Resolution, which was designed to fight Al Qaeda. The Houthi rebels are not Al Qaeda, obviously. But I'm bringing it up again because I talked about it last weekend. Let me say hello to Envoy. Um, because when I was doing as you know, the Twitter campaign over this ridiculous military budget, I encountered a user by the name of Jennifer, and roughly, I'd say maybe a few months, few weeks into the conflict in Yemen, she began tweeting about it, and she was optimistic about the United States, at least its people, becoming upset with this conflict if they found out about it, because we've talked about corporate media likes to suppress certain stories. I think MSNBC didn't even cover this until this year, because there was a bombing that killed some school children. So she came into this with the belief that, once her fellow American found out that their fellow human was being blown to pieces over a conflict they had nothing to do with, just by being in the wrong place at the wrong time, we would all rally to their defense and come out strong in support of helping the people over there. And instead, she has received a litany of ridiculous comments, stupidity, you could say retardation. I'd say lunacy, but there's loads of things that have been said. Um, and I experienced something pretty similar with the military budget, but there were a couple of responses I wanted to highlight and then kind of go into the pathology and psychology of it. Now, in a lot of her posts, she'll leave pictures of the children who, I mean, I thought about having one of the images in the background, but I didn't. I figured it might turn some people's stomachs. But if you ever want to see any photos, you can type in Yemen individuals, people that live over there. They have, again, a starvation. So, you know, I forgot to mention that the outbreak of cholera. They've in Yemen they've had the worst outbreak of cholera, this deadly disease in modern history. They have 800,000 over 800,000 cases of it, with a quarter of them having to do with children under the age of 5. So that means all these little babies and infants and toddlers are contracting this deadly disease because the Saudis, with the help of the United States, are deciding to block off their food supply. But going back to what she often will post photos of dead bodies or the food deprived children. And there was a commenter who actually attacked her on her own ethnicity and said that she was using the pictures of these war torn children to highlight her own agenda. Um, and she responded in kind by saying that it's part of desensitizing, or rather sensitizing people to the violence over there. That when you hear, because see, it's very easy for me to say, oh man, there's been 10,000 deaths, but to actually see pictures of all the bodies and people lying up in wreckage with their faces blown off and their arms removed. That does more than just rattling off some number that goes in one ear and out the other. All right, Envoy says it's funny you're mentioning conflicts in the Middle East as I was watching videos related to Saudi Arabia and America and the journalist today. Yeah, which by the way, she actually, I'm pretty sure, let me see, posted about that recently. And the idea, and I have to agree with this criticism, is that you have, again, over 10,000 civilian deaths, but all of a sudden when it happens to one journalist, oh, it's a national disgrace, a nightmare. They're doing horrible things over there. That kind of nonsense. Let's see, Saudi Arabia apparently. That's another one of them. Oh no, it's a retweet from Secular Talk where Kyle said, genuinely happy that the media organizations and some celebrities are turning on Saudi Arabia over Jamal Khashoggi. That's how you pronounce his name. Wish they could have done it sooner because of beheading people in the public square over secrecy, over sorcery, witchcraft, apostasy, drug smuggling, etc., genocide in Yemen, exporting Salafism. So that's something she retweeted. But yeah, that's going back to what you said, Envoy. It's them, mentioning this kind of. I have mixed feelings about it because, again, what happened to him, if it's true, is bad. But look what's happened to all these other people, and not a word about it. Um, but I did want to point out one post she had from about a week ago, where she said humanity is officially dead, and the person responds by saying that it only dies if you allow it to, and not to believe that that it's dead yet. Have hope. She says they're mostly all going to die of starvation within months. As soon as famine hits, which will be soon, it will be too late. We have failed to stop a genocide because we're garbage people, which some of us would concur with. This person responded by saying, we can do nothing until we have actual leaders in this country instead of the weak minded fools we have now. She says there are thousands of leaders and 7.4 billion people. The leaders are the symptom, the people are the disease, especially Americans. We are the biggest feces show in the world. There are 300 million Americans and only a few dozen who care that our troops starve children to death. His response is, it isn't the troops doing it. It is Trump and our politicians. Before that was Obama. The people care if you give them the chance. But talking down all Americans gets nothing but nastiness back. She says Americans are silent about genocide. What do you make of that? If you don't like the feelings I'm sharing after 3 years of trying to stop this genocide, feel free to ignore me. He says, I am not ignoring you. That's why I'm tweeting. You want it to stop, but until we elect people in office, nothing will be done to help get these pukes out of office. Her response is, as long as most people don't care about the people we kill, nothing will change. Americans are selfish. I didn't used to think that way, but they've taught me that only their interests matter to them. Dead children we pay to kill, meh, who cares? I gave up on Americans. So I'm going to stop reading it there because a few days ago I actually participated in trying to speak about those numbers. So the 10,000 plus people that the U.S. has helped kill in Yemen, the civilians, with Saudi Arabia selling them weapons, and then also the over 800,000 cases of famine, this deadly disease. And there were four responses I received that were significant, or at least that were actually, on the level of not being something generic and random. This person wrote back to me by saying that we could feed and clothe all the people over there and they would still want to kill us. Mind you, this person is saying this about Yemen, where we've never experienced a terrorist attack from them or the Houthi rebels. So it's all based on this idea of, everyone is out to get us. We need to be protected at all costs. Screw that we're going out of our way to make sure other people aren't protected. Self-interest. Forget the rest of the world. And it's completely part of a pattern I've noticed where when you mention a group of people that American politicians participate in disenfranchising, supporters of these politicians will find themselves having to defend whatever politician they like, whether it's a president, a senator, a congressman, by attacking the group that they're talking about. So, for example, I mentioned the fact that 76% of Americans currently live paycheck to paycheck as an example of the failure of Obama and Trump's economic policies. And the response by Trump supporters was to say that all the people need to get off their behinds. But during the Obama years, this same group of people remained quiet while Hannity criticized Obama over the homelessness and the general income inequality and such. So it's this thing where when our guy is not in office, it's the fault of the politicians. When our guy is in office, it's the fault of the person. And it's just being a partisan hack is all that really is. Envoy says people will and can find any way of defending their party blindly. The scope of objectivity is hard to come by these days. Right. Well, there was another person who said, Obama started this. I said that's correct, and they admitted they were surprised that I fessed up to, this being a bipartisan mass murder genocide. They thought I was just going to blame Trump and then leave it at that. I had another person who said that I was getting paid by Soros to tweet about this. Soros, who to my knowledge has never spoken about the Yemen conflict, uh, you know, it's all part of their nonsense where they think anyone who opposes them has some kind of financial incentive. Uh, which you would think if I were saying, "Oh no, the people in office are so good, don't get rid of any of them," that would be more susceptible to believing that there was someone paying me per keeping the status quo going. Envoy says, if news stations that we expect to give us the truth lie, this is when I realize that politics is corrupt to the core. There's no way it can't be. It only knows how to be corrupt. Yeah, and when people were sitting here talking about Kavanaugh, and oh my God, this woman and yada yada yada, my main focus with him was the fact that he's voted, or rather sided in cases with corporations 87% of the time, and that he would, in fact, preserve Citizens United, the Supreme Court decision that ruled that you can bribe politicians, and it made it legal. That said that's free speech to give somebody $1 million while they're the governor or senator of your state. So that was my concern with him. It's all part of a game. But I tried to explain. There was another person who admitted, because there was a bill that was proposed back in March of this year by Bernie, Mike Lee, and I think what's the other one? Senator from Connecticut, Murphy something, whatever. Anyway, so the three of them proposed this bill, this bipartisan bill, and it says in 30 days, unless we start fighting Al Qaeda, get the hell out of Yemen, basically. And it gets 5 Democrats to vote against it, so it fails. With about 44 people backing it, a sizable chunk. And I mentioned this in my as I go around on Twitter and say, hey, look, your guy voted to keep this genocide going. I talk about the numbers. This person responds by saying, oh, other people voted for it too. You shouldn't just blame this one person. And I said, well, look, if you have, what's a good analogy? Let's say we have 300,000 serial killers just in the United States, and they kill about 1 million people. And I say this one is horrible, this is an awful man, yada 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 yada. And then his mother, who has nothing to do with his murders, but is sympathetic because that's her son, says, "Oh, there were 299,000 other serial killers that were responsible for the 1 million murders. You shouldn't get mad at him and blame him for it." Well, you're going to say, I don't care if loads and loads of other people contributed to this. You yourself also did it. But that's the deflection about it. They don't want to admit your guy's got blood on his hands. Do you remember when you were told not to talk stuff about religion because of how intolerant people can be? Well, we see it now when people talk about, oh yeah, people are intolerable of everything, so that's to be expected. But what Jennifer ended up doing with that same bill that flopped or folded because of the lack of support for it was going and sending messages to each of the senators in like these little threads where she would post their name and then mention to them what they had done, yada yada yada. And I thought about if we could get that for all of these representatives because they think that, oh, I'm just one of 400, nobody focuses on me, I get no media attention, I can show up to work and do nothing and and they just get away with it. But it's sad because, as I said before, in a, like, for example, in my state we had Feinstein vote for the that military budget. There's 39 million people here. If we got what 33%, over 10 million people to show up at her different offices, you think she would still be supporting those same policies, knowing that more people that are opposing her than supporting her? But that's I'm talking about when I say these people don't that are in office and their supporters don't have ideologies. Envoy asked, "What are your thoughts of the American people being disgusted with the Middle East, especially in their treatment of women? But they don't realize how corrupt America can be. Also, they don't want to pay attention to their own problems. I can sit here and list off all the horrible statistics that the U.S. has, but it will fall on deaf ears because it's either repeated to the same people who already know the problem, or the people who hear it make justifications for it being around and try to get you to think, oh, it's not that bad, it's okay. Let let there be a mass shooting every day. That nonsense. Which that fact is not nonsense, but the belief that that should just go on without any thought or consideration or debate is ridiculous. But going back to what she wrote on Twitter, one of her posts was mentioning the continued frustration she's had with posting this stuff, and it's really I think a good showing of what happens to people when they get tired of just posting over and over about some story or talking about something or bringing attention to an issue and just having loads of people pretend like it's not going on. And ultimately, when I looked at those posts, I became a lot less disheartened as far as, oh man, all these scumbags, these sickos, they support genocide. When I realized, no, they just support that politician, and because they don't have an ideology, they're going to support anything they do. Why do you think all of these, you know, Christians or evangelical voters supported Trump, who had 3 marriages and apparently cheated on all of his wives? And look, I don't even think that should be a topic that is worth, discussing of him as a politician. But let's, keep it real. The whole thing about heaven on earth and honor thy woman and all that it's not applicable to Trump. It isn't. But it's one of those things where people who like him will just bend that and say, oh well, let's look the other way. Yeah, envoy, honor thy neighbor. And ultimately, that's kind of what you have to understand about these senators. I keep having to explain to people the only reason this goes on is because the defense contractors go up to the senators, the representatives, and they say, hey man, uh, I can give you $1 million for your reelection bid. Just vote to keep that thing in Yemen going. All those kids that are getting murdered and having the worst outbreak of call run modern history. Look the other way. Don't think about that. See, it's very easy I want you to understand that, like, the lives of a lot of these senators. These people are ranging from the ages of 40 to, in a couple of cases, 80. So that means they don't go on social media. They don't look up hashtags and tweets and all this other stuff. So what they end up doing is they go into this room and they, put their thumb up to vote a certain way. And then while these bombs are being dropped in this other country, they're not seeing it on TV. They're one place of seeing news. So they just voted for this genocide that they don't have to watch, they don't have to witness, they don't have to hear talked about by the media. They don't have to hear from their constituents about. Just nothing. Just a vote for money. That's how simple and sick the current system of government is, where people can decide the lives of thousands in a few minutes and then just go back to walking around like nothing happened. But you'll hear more buzz and more media attention devoted to a some man that is hasn't done anything yet. To Kavanaugh's credit, it's been a week. Nothing major has changed. Abortion is still here. Now, obviously, we're going to see what happens in the coming weeks, months, and years. But you get the idea that we have actual, and that's why I'm not excited for this presidential election, because all the candidates propped up are just, for the most part, warmongers. And then the ones that aren't, they get attacked for every other view they have. So it's just this damned if you do, damned if you don't circumstance. And the same thing with Jennifer. This is a person who thought, I can go on here and talk to people and show them facts and logic and reasoning and, appeal to their humanity, and I get crapped on. Just because they don't care. And it's all part of the same sick cycle of individuals in one country not being able to empathize with individuals in another country because they've never experienced it. They've talked about how with a lot of these Yemen children, they'll go to bed, praying and putting their hands over their ears, not knowing if tonight is going to be their last night before one of those American airstrikes drops down, destroys their home, and potentially takes their life. And none of these Americans have ever had to deal with that. I mean, for God's sakes, when 9/11 killed less than 3,000 people, in Yemen, we've had the triple that, and they just don't care because it doesn't affect them. They don't know anyone who died. They don't know. They don't live on the same soil as anyone who died. It's not being reported by the media, year after year, week after week, day after day. So it doesn't. It's not applicable to them, and that's why they don't have a problem with, like for example, I could tweet about the thing in Yemen a million times, and Trump would still get 60 million people to vote for him again. And see, if voters were smart, the ones that are part of the Trump cult, the ones that will stick by him no matter what, they would say, okay, you know what, we'll vote for you again, but it's got to be on the pledge that you change this particular policy. We're going to protest and say this is a guy we support, we're his base, screw the liberals, but we're not for that, for killing kids that had nothing to do with anything. And that's how you actually lobby for change and convince politicians that they can't let certain things go by. But they're not doing that. They're just going, oh, who cares about some people over there? Oh, well, so what? And so when you have someone who, goes on Twitter all day, or rather all week or all year, and just post, hey, care, care, care. Envoy says, who would have thought that policies which allow killing of children would be okay? Yeah, just like with the ICE thing with Trump. All these people, ICE has been around since 2003. Two different presidents before Trump, and then all of a sudden when he gets in office last year, we're now supposed to care about the treatment of immigrant families and children being taken away from their parents. And look, I'm not a fan of the American immigration policy at all. I think it's overblown, but that's something that's been going on for well over a decade. I mean, we've had ICE since I was in kindergarten. So it's really inexcusable. And so is the same way that she's been treated on there. That you have someone who goes around, says, I've got nothing to gain or benefit from just talking about this issue. And these people tell her it's just to stop caring. That's strange. Why would you be so concerned with a place you don't live, with people you don't know? That's the price of giving a damn. You have people who question why such a view would even exist. Why such a mentality to look after your fellow human would even manifest in your mind. So, I don't intend on doing streams unless something major comes up, breaking news or something. But I felt the desire to speak about this. Always says that's why it's inexcusable, because for a lot of Americans in other countries, because they do this as well, it's just a blank face. Yeah, and it's going to keep persisting. And people like Jennifer are going to keep trying to warn other Americans over and over again that they live in an oligarchy that supports murdering tens of thousands of people, or rather thousands of people, for the sake of making some dollars for the people at the top. Envoy says people don't care. You kill a family you can't see because you can't see them. They live over there across the city or across town. It's sad, man. Yeah, and the most asinine thing about the American perspective is, could you imagine if in the U.S. these people that are on Twitter talking about much they don't care and they're not sympathetic and ha 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 ha, it's what they get. Could you imagine if they woke up one day and they went outside and they found their entire neighborhood destroyed, a couple of people still alive after having bombs dropped on their house? All of those people, including the ones who were particularly the ones who were not sympathetic, would want your sympathy. They would want you to say, "Oh man, this other country is destroying the U.S. All these people who had nothing to do with the leader and this conflict overseas shouldn't be dying like this, and it's so horrible." And they would be right to say, "This is wrong. You shouldn't do this to regular people who had nothing to do with any of this nonsense." But they don't give a damn. And that's the price of giving a damn. You wake up and you internalize and you say, that could be me. If I had been born in the wrong place, I could be getting my head blown off just for living in the wrong country. I always says you keep it so real in America. I'm glad I would consider myself a moderate right now, socially more so because I think crazy liberals go too far. I don't even know what these liberals are because all the self-proclaimed ones I see that are in office, like the quote unquote ones like Schumer and Pelosi, remain quiet about this. Always says, but I see people on both sides who are just biased because it's sad. Told you I have no penchant for either party. They've both been complicit in this nonsense. It pisses me off that Democratic support for pulling out of Yemen is only coming now after their buddy Hillary lost the White House and they want revenge on Trump. You should have been pissed when your friend Obama was doing it too, but that would mean standing up to their quote unquote party leader. And they just don't care. They sit there and go, whatever. So it's another sad reminder of where we are and why, politicians are so, I don't want to say overrated, but they've run their course. People talk about term limits. I'm talking about money limits. We keep pretending that they're this twisted because that's their ideology. It's not about that. It's about getting paid, taking the most money, seeing how much you can profit. Always says, the parties, because they are literally flipped policies. So the Democrats, they were the Republicans of 60 years ago, or it's so baffling. Yeah, but like I said, whether it was the military budget support for what we're doing in Yemen, very often have we seen both sides have unanimous consent in just being unapologetic murderers. And their supporters who want to play this tribalism nonsense go after people like myself. If you talk about like you, Envoy, or like Jennifer, who post over and over again about how ridiculous it is to support someone just because they have a D or an R next to their name. Now I'm going to show you what is being the one saving grace behind all this stuff. There is a resolution. I think it's called it's HCon Res 138, and one of it directs the president by Section 5C of the War Powers Resolution to remove American armed forces from hostilities in the Republic of Yemen that have not been authorized by Congress. So this could end this entire conflict. You would see this stuff be changed overnight if we could get congressional support for it. But because we have a majority Republican Congress and we have a bunch of Democrats who, remember, 5 Democrats voted against the bill that Bernie introduced that would have removed us from Yemen in a month. So it's still a slicey and dicey. Basically, the only thing we can do at this point, since the president is not going to change anything, he likes this policy. I'm so different from Obama, except when I kept bombing thousands of people in Yemen. They're very different. So the only thing we have to do now is just call our congressman and tell them to support this measure. I have little hope that people will wake up and realize this, but I'm putting it out there. Again, House Con Resolution 138. directing the president per Section 5C of the War Powers Resolution to remove American armed forces from hostilities in the Republic of Yemen that have not been authorized by Congress. So you can make the change if you call your congressman. I don't think anybody will. Anybody that checks my stuff out, you might get somebody to just flip over. And nobody would really dare to fight the U.S. because the military may be North Korea or Russia. North Korea would get blown in the water. Russia and, or rather, Trump and Putin are good buddies, so that probably won't happen. So I hope you call your congressman envoy. I hope the other 5 unidentified individuals call their congressman. You know, I'm not optimistic anymore. And a lot of people will say when you don't show that think you can do it, then it falls through. But this is based entirely around the reception that's been received when this information has come out and been extolled to people who want to live in this fantasy world about how different the two parties are, or how both of them are okay or good or whatever, while they're committing a war crime that kills, again, thousands of people, worst genocide, rather worst cholera outbreak in modern history. I would encourage Elliot to call his congressman about House Congressional Resolution 138. I doubt he will. That's the way that we orchestrate ourselves now. So I'm going to end the stream. Uh, this is the price of giving a damn. You have people who go out and they talk about something that is significant, and because people want to engage in tribalist politics, they remove themselves from the idea that there are some bad policies exercised by people that they like, and decide to keep the nonsense going on, no matter the cost, so long as they can stay in their little clique of evil. So it's a sad set of circumstances that the people have the power to change, but there aren't enough of them willing to care. I'm going to leave you with a quote from Jennifer that I read earlier that is summarizing of what I'm talking about. There are thousands of leaders and 7.4 billion people. The leaders are the symptom, the people are the disease, especially America.